want to start?
Yes, I'm going to call the Economic Development Tourism Committee meeting to order on August 5th. And present, we have the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you. Why don't we just go around the room with introductions?
Matt Murphy from the Port Arthur Chamber of Commerce.
Scott Diener, council member.
Nick Vine, Community Development Director.
Carrie Sully, Community Development. Charlotte Carriba, Gibson County.
Jay Rosebeck, council member.
And I'm Beck Ashby, chair of the council member. And
Jack Edwards, days in.
And Charlotte, we do that because we tape these and they're available. We have a guest with us this morning, and she's here specifically for item number 4. But I believe we will, in the interest of time, jump up and do number 3 because that also involves the county. And then as soon as our mayor gets here, we can move down to number 4. So, Nick, should I turn this one over to you or to Carrie? Basically, it's the plastic bag ordinance.
Okay, so I've just kind of been working informally with Chris Piercy just to finalize getting everything in order about our 2 ordinances, because my understanding is we want to have them mirror each other as closely as possible. So the county, I believe, had an initial hearing on this a week or so ago, and there was just one thing that Chris had told me that was going to be changed, which was the film plastic bags. This is on it's on the third page of the county ordinance near the bottom. Film plastic bags that are things like you put your produce like carrots and celery in. Those had mistakenly been left out. Those are to be exempted from the 8 cents charge. And so they're putting that in at the request of the Grocers Association. And so I wanted to talk to Sharon about that when she's back from her vacation today, just make sure she's okay with that and adding that to our ordinance as well. And so assuming the council's okay with that, our ordinance will also reflect that in what goes before them at the hearing on the 13th.
Okay. Any comments from council?
No, I think we had talked about making that exemption a long time ago. Part of the ordinance,
Right.
so that's fair.
So my understanding is the county is going to take action on this item on August 12th.
Okay. The one, Jay, did you have, well,
Well, I had the one.
you have the one item. Let me do mine. Mine is
Sure.
quicker than yours.
Yeah.
It's on page 3 of 6 in the handout you gave us. It's 3B. They're talking about recycled paper bags. And anyway, 3B says, is accepted for recycling in curbside programs in a majority of households that have access to curbside recycling programs in Kitsap County. Should that read City of Port Orchard?
Probably.
City ordinance, I would say that would be appropriate.
Okay?
That was the one thing I had.
Nice catch.
And then I know that Jay had some comments.
You know, I'm gonna look at Matt on this one a little bit. And
You don't want to get me started on this one.
Well, I do, actually, a little bit.
So,
Well,
okay.
that's why you're here, you know. But my question is why do we mandate an 8 cents pass-through charge? I mean, why should that be up to there's a cost for plastic bags that they're not gonna have. Some people, is the question we're trying to get people not to do bags at all? I'm just was
You
wondering.
made that work study when we,
I was there, I may not have.
okay,
but
so,
I mean,
that was the path we were taking, that we weren't gonna mandate anything.
Mhm.
And then we had the grocery industry come to our work study and told us why we should.
Right.
So that was the shift.
So the grocery store industry, okay, what about all the other retailers in Kitsap County? Did we hear from anybody else besides the grocery store industry? I mean, is the object for the government to interfere with the operations of local businesses? I mean, this is an operational issue. If a business needs to charge for their bags, then let them charge for their bags. If a business does not need to charge if grocery stores want to charge for their bags, fine. This old Central Antique Mall's been using paper now for years. Now all of a sudden she's going to have to start charging. And, you know, are we presuming that those people that are on welfare and on food stamps are less likely to throw their bags into the bay than everybody else? Because if we're gonna create a law that protects the environment, why are we exempting a particular group of people from having to pay that fine in order to get bags?
I don't see the nexus there, Matt. If we're
There-
banning,
well,
we're
there's-
banning the bag, we're banning the bag.
But you're not banning the bags for the
For the-
helpline and for the people that are on the EBD cards and those people,
But the grocery store won't have them.
huh? But they don't have to pay for them. They don't have to pay the 8 cents when they get their paper bag.
But the food banks and other food assistance programs are exempt from the requirements of this chapter. So the food bank is able to hand out plastic bags.
I don't know that I don't know.
So-
I don't know that I agree with that or not. We're doing it for environmental reasons.
Then it should apply to everybody. You know, and I'm not as concerned with the food bank as I am for every other Joe that walks in off the street with an EBT card who's exempt from this particular regulation because they.
But he's not exempt from the regulation. He does not have to pay the 8 cents.
Right, why should he not have to pay when I do? It's an unfair fine and penalty.
Tax free.
Sorry, Scott.
I was just wondering how much of the bags that are used by food banks and other food assistance programs will be reduced just by attrition.
Yeah, that's true, because they won't be recycled.
Won't be as many available.
Yeah.
The other thing, I just comment, and then I know that Charlotte Garrido has limited time this morning, is I was in Gig Harbor yesterday at the Target, and, yeah.
I've already been there.
When I got to the checkout stand, the first question out of the clerk's mouth was, do you want to buy a bag?
Same way everywhere in Tacoma.
Yeah, I had not experienced that before, so.
No.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, you know, but at Safeway, I'm not Safeway, I'm sorry, Subway,
They've already done it.
they've already done it, and there's no pass-through, they don't even ask, you know, on that. And that's my only thing, I understand the grocers, I have a hard time with it. Let businesses decide on the pass-through, that's my feeling about it, and that's it.
And I have held that position from the beginning, that it's a business decision. They can or they can't. I don't care if they charge a penny or $1. It's up to them. But I think, the reason at work study that the council moved towards the 8 cents is that was going to, what we anticipated coming out of the state's legislation. And therefore, and they were going to override anything, preempt anything that we did. And so I think that's why we put it in there. So, are we good bringing this forward to
Sounds like
council?
there would be more discussion on the.
At
on the
council.
Yeah,
bag fee.
potential amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everything else, I'm good with, and so we could always amend it if we wanted to there.
Well, I think
Yes.
what we're gonna have is, I mean, I haven't seen the agenda for the 13th. Was it on the 13th for a public hearing?
Okay,
The thought was that we would continue that public hearing, and potentially take action on the 20th.
okay, that's a good plan.
And the person who came and spoke on behalf of other retailers, I don't recall how much representation they said they had with some of the smaller businesses, but I thought it was pretty broad. I thought
Who
they
was
were
it?
fairly inclusive. I don't remember the name.
I thought she was a lobbyist for the Association of Washington Grocery Stores.
Seems to ring true.
Yeah, there was a couple of them that were in attendance, but.
There was a couple of folks from the retail and grocery
Right.
industry.
Yeah, because I still think that, I mean, reading the threads on Facebook is the city's taking the hit, the blame, and I know you guys don't care about that, but it just appears as though there's another opportunity for the city and for the county to reach into people's pockets by demanding that the retailers pay this 8 cents. And I know that, from what I understand, I think that guy that was here from the county, he basically said that the county wanted a hammer, and I believe those were his words, a hammer to make people start using the reusable bags. And if you want to do something like this, start it in a year. Give people a chance. Give people a chance to start carrying their bags in. And then when they don't, after a year, fine.
I suspect you'll see an amendment to discuss that.
I also think,
I won't-
we'll be trumped by the state.
Yes.
And then, yeah,
Okay. Cool.
This is just something I whipped up, and it isn't gonna be all of the questions, is relating to this PFD discussion. I know since I wrote this, Charlotte and I have a meeting Wednesday. Erickson and I have a meeting Friday, just to try to get our arms around, some of the questions that I put on this. So, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping into, out of respect for Charlotte's
You
time.
did, you just boom. We are moving on to our public facilities district recap.
Because we're not gonna solve the other one this morning.
No, but what we did with the other one is,
Thank you. I appreciate
we have a
that.
plan.
We have a plan. We're moving it to the work study. We're gonna have a public hearing, and then
Right.
council will give direction
Right.
as to what that final document will look like.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Likely adoption, end of this month, if not in September.
But we don't have a work study.
We don't have a work study. It'll
Okay,
be,
okay,
it'll
you said
go
work study, and I.
Yeah, we've got a public hearing at our next meeting on the 13th with potential
action,
action on the following meeting.
following meeting or in September.
Okay, and so now we're on to a recap. I asked the mayor to give us a recap of the public facilities district's work they've been doing.
So, if anybody's followed any of the articles in the paper, or were at the meeting a week ago today in the evening, the city came out, the number one ranked project. I don't think anybody knows what that means. There's three, ours was one, Paulsbo was two, the North Kitsap Trail project was three, and the racetrack project was four. The racetrack already has an ILA. They were prepared to give us study and design money that evening. I said, whoa, that's making me nervous. I don't want to take money without having a plan for how we're going to spend that money. And the last thing I want to do is take money for a plan or a study and put it on a shelf. I think this, whatever this commitment from the PFD needs to conclude, what is the overall financial commitment? Because how can we design something if we don't know how expensive what it is we're designing is?
My first question, going back to your first bullet point, is what does that mean? When I read their agenda, they had a meeting scheduled for next Monday
Correct.
at Bainbridge Islands.
And
City Hall.
I've been in communication with their executive director and a couple of their board members. Our city council meeting is until the next night.
Correct,
I'm
but
not
what I
gonna
was,
be at that meeting.
what I was going to say was the agenda for that meeting included a topic that said final project, I can't say it, they're gonna prioritize them with a final at that meeting. That's what was on their printed agenda. So we may wanna clarify that.
Okay, I'll reach back out to Mike. What the resolution that was passed that evening was the top three for the staff to start negotiating and enter into ILAs with the top three projects for funding.
Okay.
And I've been in contact with Mike, and I'm just trying to, it's a study and a commitment to design something will not move the needle with the bank and this master plan project. They need a commitment that they're gonna, the current ask is, so just, that's in my next bullet, that the funding and study are not enough to move the master plan project.
Right.
And so to just jump into what I believe are the next steps, okay? The first step is going to be, and I think this needs to be all-inclusive in this ILA for us to be comfortable with this, is the short-term need is further space analysis. We need to iron out ownership and who owns it. And that's what, we've got partners, we've got public partners in this, us, the county, the port. We also have tenant partners, which are the library, some sort of a banquet meeting space entity, and there's a third piece that we don't know yet, and that's what this analysis needs to be. I've got a meeting next couple days with the Boys and Girls Club. They seem interested. Is that a good fit? I don't know. That's for all the partners to decide and our community to decide. And there needs to be a community engagement aspect to this process. And then we're gonna design it after we know how much money we have and what our community wants. Our current ask is $13 million for a $20 million project, or about 65%. I don't think that number, and ours is the least expensive of the top 3 or even of the top 4, and there isn't enough money for everybody. So what does that look like? And I don't want to sell us short, but I think looking at the Village Greens project, which I think is really similar to what, and I think our council, I think it's a field trip. I went up and did a field trip to see that. They did it for $12 million a couple years ago.
So, to get back to your item 1 there under that bullet, short-term needs. But I've heard things like the library, you've mentioned Boys and Girls Club, you've mentioned meeting rooms. I've heard that, I'm not clear if this project is a convention center or if this project is a community center. And I see them as different venues. So that clarity needs to happen in my mind.
I think there is meeting and banquet space in this. I don't think it's a conference facility like Bremerton is myself. And this is really my conversation with Mayor Erickson this morning for 30 seconds, because I was at a different meeting with her and we decided we were going to meet Friday. They're going to do a Parks and Rec levy for their portion of it up in Paulsbo. Could be very well. I think there's possibility to, we've got an antiquated building in Givens up there. There was a senior center there. Maybe that's part of this. Maybe it's.
But you might also consider some
theater.
Programs that the YMCA puts out.
Yeah, and I think that's what
So that's all inclusive.
That's the study and figuring out what is our community will support, and will our community support a Parks and Recs levy? Because we're gonna have to raise a piece of this as a community. There's no doubt about that. Number 3, we need a commitment though from the PFD to the end game. Let's assume it is. I don't think it is 20 million. I think it's more like 15, 16 million, because they did the Kingston one for 12.
They had a lot of volunteer
They do. And
work go into that, though.
they did, and I think you can easily add a couple $1 million to it, because now it's a government process, and another $1 million because we're a few years later in a very hot construction economy. So, I think 15, 16's good, but I don't want to sell ourselves short. If we worked off of this, we're raising $7 million as a community. Even if, it might shrink and we still might be in somewhere in that ballpark. But I think we need a commitment from the we need a commit from the PFD for what's our top end number, what's their commitment. Then we're going through a process in our community to determine, will our community support this? And until we we get some money from them, $500,000, $750,000 is what they were offering to us the other evening. But we need that commitment for what it is ahead of that process. And if we can get an ILA that's structured in that manner, I believe that will satisfy the master plan developer and the bank.
Will that ILA, or at some point, will we address a time frame?
I think it has to, or should, and I don't think it's 6 months or a year. It is probably 3 years, and I hope it's not 5, you know, but that's just me shooting from the hip.
Right, do we have any idea what the time frame of Kitsap Bank is?
I believe that if we get a commitment from the PFD and we commit to this project and this process, they will move
Forward.
ahead of us.
Okay.
And this will get constructed and be probably done as that's just starting. But they want the commitment, that we're committed to this, and then they'll take those steps. So I have more, just as many questions as you do,
No,
to be
exactly.
honest.
Right, no.
Jay?
But we should form some of the answers.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what we're trying to do here.
Sorry.
And, no, it's fine. And then there's the other parallel path, which I don't understand, that's Waterman. You know, with Waterman, the group, Steve's group.
Yeah, he's not part of this any longer. And there's a handoff of,
Yeah, I understand that with the community center, I understand with Kitsap Bank, but we also have the development of.
You're talking about 640.
With 640.
it's not Waterman, it's
not- I'm
Sound
sorry.
West Group.
Okay.
Sound West Group, okay, so Steve
Our
has,
purchase and sale is with Waterman.
our purchase and sale is with Waterman.
Yeah.
Okay, if this master plan project moves forward, Waterman has tied up all of the properties put a nice neat bow on it, and have handed, the only piece of property that isn't under contract is the 7-Eleven site. Everything else is tied up in the entire master plan project. So they've got it.
Okay.
This is the last piece, and then he takes all of his entitlements. Sound West enters into a development agreement with the bank, and the project moves forward.
Okay, thanks. I had to come to work more often.
So yeah, he's worked to assemble all of the property with a number of parties. And it's great Commissioner Garrido's here. What I've heard, and talking to Mike Walton, well, I haven't heard it, Mike Walton's told me this, if the county issues the debt, which they're asked the bond debt, which the PFD is asking them to do, initially the county, they can issue up to $30 million in debt. The county has initially wrote them a letter that they're not interested in that. You have your own funding needs for a courthouse campus and other needs. But I've heard since then that there's a meeting and the county, at least someone told Mike Walton that these projects are too important not to find a way to move them forward. So maybe you can, so if there isn't a solution found for this bonding, if the PFD moves forward because of their bonding rate, their rate is in the high 3s, and they lose $10 million in funding opportunity. So now there's $20 million to divvy up and not $30 million, which is significant. And were you involved in any of those meetings, or can you speak to that at all?
Well, I mean, we talked about it, but we really haven't come to a conclusion yet. I didn't see it on any of our meetings today,
Okay.
but I will take it back.
Okay, if you could.
Yeah.
So,
I need to interject my thought on that. What I'm reading here is if the PFD borrows funds, their rate is significantly higher, reducing the amount they could borrow by 10 million. And
yeah,
so,
so the allocations go by.
so there's an opportunity for the jurisdictions to do bonding at a preferred rate. What I'm not hearing here is what's the PFD's ability to repay. As we remember, I'm the recovering banker, and this is something that the bank would never consider. It's like, let me use my friend over here, Matt Murphy. It's like Shannon and Scott, his daughter and son-in-law, wanting to buy a house and going to the bank, and the bank can say, well, you qualify for a $200,000 house. And Shannon and Scott saying, I want a $300,000 house. My mom and dad can borrow that money and put it in their name, and we'll make the payments.
It's-
That's what they're asking us to do. So what has not been done here is a credit analysis, and we would be, the city, whoever issues the bonds, are responsible for the payment of those bonds.
Correct.
Even if the PFD gives us the cash flow, we need to know that can that cash flow support the increased debt that they're not eligible for on their own?
And you're jumping ahead a little bit here, but I'll address that. So there could be an opportunity for whether it's the county solely, the city solely for our project, or in a partnership for parts of it, for the issuance of that debt. And it is, Dave Tregesser, who is our bond counsel, is the same bond counsel that PFD uses. So if we were to get comfortable with that process, the PFD has a portion of the state's sales tax, and we would need to make sure that those sales tax projections are conservative, as we would be. We've been very conservative on our borrowings here at the city of Port Orchard. And I'm not saying this is what we should do. I'm just trying to identify
Right, and you were asked the question.
paths forward. And
Right.
I was asked the question at the PFD meeting, whether the city would consider bonding this, and I said, it's the first I've heard of this. And so then that's in the paper, and it's on Facebook that the city's doing it, and that's not the case. This is the first discussion, and we're gonna have another discussion next Tuesday about these very talking points. And there would need to be a considerable amount of analysis to go whether or not, what those documents look like, and whether or not the analysis is something that we can get comfortable with from that repayment source. I don't know. I know that right now, our bonding capacity is $15 million on general fund, and that's after Tremont. We have taken, and our utilities have much higher bonding capabilities than that, and these are all non-voted debt that I'm referring to. We have a whole bunch more, and I wouldn't be comfortable with us borrowing $15 million against our general fund at all, not on our cash flow, because I'm fairly conservative myself. I know we've taken out 2 loans recently that could have been, that are utility loans. One's for well 13, one is for the Marina Pump Station. And as of Friday afternoon, I still have finance looking at what did we pledge for collateral. We could have just pledged our utility. If we pledged the good faith and credit of the city, it eats part of this $15 million, and I don't have the answers to that at this point. This is a whole bunch of stuff that I threw on paper Friday around a Tremont celebration. I was a little bit busy. So that's the questions we've got to answer are, if we traveled this path, is a $120 million master plan project a good use of our debt capacity, not our cash flow, because the cash flow would have to be coming from the PFD. And is that, if we chose to do that, are there things that we're going to need that for? And coming to mind, I know we have a number of utility needs, but that's a separate slice. There's a separate slice of dollars for those. I know we have needs at City Hall. Tremont, we borrowed on 15 years. Our payments are just shy of $500,000, and the principal's going down about $400,000 a year. We made our second payment on that just a few days ago. So that's as much as I know. And I have a lot more meetings this week about this subject matter, and hope to be able to give better answers and answer more questions Tuesday night, because I plan to add it as a discussion item to Tuesday's agenda.
Scott and Jay, do you have questions?
Not right now. I have some, but not
Well,
tonight.
for me, there's too many holes at this point to really
There
get
is.
my head around it, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, it's better to get more info before.
And I'm not prepared to bring an ILA forward from the PFD until we've got answers to all of our questions. Because I think this ILA needs to be holistic, not just to handing us some design money, but
Right.
and answering what I've listed here and a lot more questions that we haven't unearthed yet.
I know for myself, it just does not seem to me like a good use of public funds. And that's what the PFD money is, it's public funds. To fund a design study, if that study is gonna sit on a shelf. There has to be commitments behind it for funding. And there also has to be commitments from our private partners that they're going to do, that they're gonna follow through with things they've said. And I think, again, it's the, what I see has happened in this project, and I'm glad Charlotte is here and appreciate the work the mayor's done. But this community center, conference center, or event center, I think is what they're calling it, has not been engaged in any part of a public process yet. And so that feels, and I don't know that that makes any difference, you know, the origin, the creativity that came up with it. But before we put public money in it, at any amount, it needs a public process.
So, several years ago, I did quite a bit of many meetings. And that's pretty rusty now, but not a whole lot has changed in terms of community centric kinds of things here in South Kitsap. So we could probably start at that point and begin to plug in the need for information that you've laid out. Because I think these are fabulous questions and must be answered quickly. And maybe the funding can help get that accomplished. As long as we have a
Right.
really concise outline, it's much more likely to be acknowledged.
'Cause I agree with Beck, and what my concern was that night, they were ready to hand me a $750,000, and I'm like, hold it. We don't have any framework to how we're gonna spend these dollars and what they can be used for. And I just didn't wanna, all of a sudden, well, they gave us $750,000 so we'd go away.
Yep. That's how it felt.
And that's kind of what it felt like, and, we'll put this study on the shelf. The only reason, it's gonna be a huge lift for our
Oh,
staff.
exactly, are the resources.
To run this process, it's gotta have an outcome that benefits our community.
The other thing that I have read in the paper and on Facebook, and I think that you mentioned.
It's true, it's on Facebook.
It's true if it's on Facebook, and that I believe you mentioned casually, either here at a council meeting, but what I'm reading is all of a sudden the city of Port Orchard is the lead agency on this. And I'm going, we've never talked about our resources, and are we in fact going to put, our community development department, move them from the work they're doing now onto this? So that's a commitment the council has to make also.
I wonder, going back to your public outreach kind of discussion though, and looking at Kingston, if there's not some way to build a stronger public engagement.
Right,
Really, truly, and maybe even a fiscal.
right.
And I think that's all part of, in these short-term needs in this ILA, that we're going to do those things. And I don't believe we have time to do a public process ahead of
The ILA.
the ILA.
Yeah.
This deal is close to falling apart.
And we don't want the,
I personally don't want
Right.
to see that happen.
Right.
This is
Right,
too
right.
exciting
Right.
and too transformative.
It's too necessary.
And
Right.
necessary, absolutely. But there needs to be that public process,
Yep.
and we need, Kingston was funded with the Parks and Rec levy. It was. And once we raise the money, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's the easier part. There is gonna be $150,000 to $200,000 a year in ongoing maintenance and operation. And that goes on forever. These things don't make money, and we need to, maintain it and operate it. And that's where are those funds coming from? We have to figure that out too.
So in Kingston, they they did most of the fundraising. And that's not gonna happen in the same way here in the South End, because we don't have the kind of the tight-knit
Yeah, they're pretty-
community organization. But we can help build that, and it can at least be an important element of what we're talking about.
I think there's many things.
And
we
you're a
can-
banker, but I'm an organizer, so.
And there's many things, well, it may not be an exact fit, there's many, many similarities.
Right.
And I think it's a good model.
I agree. And I think it's absolutely a wonderful, wonderful opportunity and challenge. So I'm actually late for my meeting, so I need to go.
Yes.
Um,
And we're meeting Wednesday, so we'll.
Good. I'm looking forward to ongoing conversations and putting some further details together. So thank you for the questionnaire.
Yep. My pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Is there any other questions Jay or Scott has at this time?
No, I just,
I mean-
that's funny, just get back from fishing, you probably could use the analogy, who's back on the hook?
Right,
I mean, I'm thrilled that we came out on top.
right.
And now we gotta capitalize on that. And we've got all there's more questions than there are answers at this point.
I felt like the redheaded stepchild by the time I left that meeting with their comments after the announcement. It was like,
Right, and
give the money, give the design money, go away. You're absolutely
I-
right.
I sort of
You're
felt like-
absolutely right.
Was that offer organized?
No, they are anything but organized.
So,
but
Jack, you were there.
I would suggest,
when I say organized, did that have the support of the majority of the
They
board
would
going
have,
into that?
they would have, if I hadn't have raised concerns and said, we need a structure to this, we need an agreement.
Mhm.
That's
They
when
would've
Bill
done it.
Mahan spoke up and said, yeah, that's what we did with the racetrack. Why aren't we doing that here? And then that morphed into a motion for all three of the top three to enter into ILA. So it leads me to believe the top 3-4 projects are gonna get some funding.
Mhm.
And
I
I'm just
have-
gonna be honest, I'm gonna go meet with Mayor Erickson because I wanna find out, what's their bottom line,
Mhm.
okay? If the projects can work it out and deliver a package to the board, because this thing is so flippin' political, it's ridiculous. I mean, everybody had a top number one, because it was their community's project.
the other thing that, if you weren't there, after they announced the ranking, each member of their commission said
Mhm.
their ranking, and Port Orchard was not first in any one, but we were second and third in everyone's.
Hmm.
So some of them.
And a couple of fours, but
And,
yeah.
and some of them went from a 1 to a 4, so, and we didn't ever hear the final total, whether we were by 1 point or 2 points or 10 points.
Yeah.
But what concerned me, which I had mentioned earlier, is the agenda. They had, the meeting for the last week, there was the agenda item that they're gonna prioritize, rank the projects, project ranking. And then on the 12th is another agenda item that says final project ranking. So it tells me they have an opportunity to massage those. So that was, I don't think what we got last Monday was a final. And I don't know what happens, and that's why we need to listen.
Yeah, well, and we need to quickly engage, that's why I got a meeting with Charlotte
And
and Mayor Erickson, and so we're just trying to get out in front of it.
yeah,
And provide them the answers that'll make them comfortable, and then potentially the developers of this project comfortable, so that they can move forward, because they're not comfortable. The level of commitment we have right now, I wouldn't be comfortable with it either. Funded a study that gets done and potentially goes on a shelf. Where's the project?
Right.
I just want to be careful that, but I like your idea of the top 3. If you guys could come to some sort of an agreement, it may help the group, make decisions.
And the fourth one is that the ride park?
It's racetrack.
Oh, okay. What's the mountain bike?
Three.
That's the third one, okay.
And every one of these projects, ours is the least grandiose. I mean, Paul's Post is 30 or 40 million, and they're asking for all of the money. The racetrack is asking for all of the money. I think the trail, it's scalable. They're asking for all of the money.
The racetrack's is only asking for the part that is a public facilities, not the construction of the actual track.
Correct,
So
but
the
it's
public-
still
right.
all of the money.
I thought the Wright Park was getting money from timber sales to finance the construction. So there's a research.
And that's part of why I want to meet with Mayor Exon. I don't know enough about her project. I need to have a meeting to understand her project, and same with the other. So, how can we come together and unify versus working against each other?
And this may be beating a dead horse here, with their comments from the meeting, but, one of their comments was, this is what we do, and it's to impact growth within the community also. Seed money in a way. And from what I heard, and I don't know enough about the track, you're putting in X in the Port Orchard, and the multiplication is amazing. 120 million in that. I didn't hear that from the other projects, because of where we're at. And that's one of the things that kind of bypassed, and I'm going to say this, and I'm definitely just shut up afterwards, is when they went around the table, everybody was like, they weren't my number one, they weren't my number one, and they all made a point of it, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. So
I gotta be careful what I say here, but Brian
I don't.
Nielsen is a long-time friend. They were clients of mine at the bank, and I have no ill will towards the track. I know for a fact that up north, they hate this track project, and they were prepared, if it got funding, that they were gonna bring litigation. That's how much they dislike the project.
The other things that I noticed,
Because
and I know,
they didn't feel the process, they were given a jump start in the process and so on and so forth. So, I'm trying to stay out of that, and I'm trying to find consensus where we can, and how can we all move
what,
forward together.
what I would like to, I have another comment to mention that. But one of the things that the trails, the Port Gamble project did, is they really focused on the financial commitment they have already made to that. Not the PFD, but the Olympic properties. They're talking, they've put 11 million here, 8 million there. They've talked about the success they've had. So one of the things I would encourage Port Orchard to do, if we do become the lead agency on this, is to reframe our conversation. I think we need to reframe our
And
conversation
I will
a little
own,
bit.
I've said, we are prepared to be the lead. There's no agreement signed between us.
And anybody, I know.
We're all just said, I just recognize from my meetings with Commissioner Stokes and Commissioner.
Right,
And
and
I've shared with you guys,
Right.
if I didn't take a leadership role in this, it was going nowhere
Right,
fast.
and I appreciate all that, but the way it comes across when you see it in print
Yeah.
and you see it in Facebook, I don't know about the rest of the council, but I've been getting emails. I had an email Tuesday morning. I don't know when that citizen was up, but he was really pounding me hard about, why are we bonding for this when the roads in front of my house are so-and-so? And, it went on pretty good, and there was nothing in his message that I could disagree with. So I just let him know that council had not talked about bonding.
So I hope to bring this piece of paper with more questions and maybe a couple of answers.
When you're talking with the county, remember that Port Gamble is undergoing a master plan redevelopment right now for nearly 300 new homes in that area. And that is gonna be a huge economic development and incentive up there. And so they will have resources in a period of time that they don't have now.
I
That's right
think
next
there's an
door.
opportunity for all of us to look back at our projects and what's Can we take something less? Can we phase? Can
Yeah.
we?
How can we, right,
And how can we all, how can we live, if we can get to 30 million, how can we all live in 30 million?
Yeah.
Because I think for sure the bottom three there were 7 projects, the bottom 3 are out. They aren't getting an ILA. And just how far does that 30 million get through 1 through 4?
I also appreciate that Scott has some time elements this morning, so I would like to move back to our videos. I would like Scott to be able to look at the videos
Sure.
before you leave.
So while she's figuring that out, the bonding that you, is that like, when you say $50 million in city capacity, is that like the council?
Councilmatic bond.
Okay, that's, and then,
And general obligation.
and then the next thing is that, and I offered it to the school district, when we work on the outreach and stuff like that, we will help with that, because people are leery if the city's putting on this forum, or if the school district, they look at it as, okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna listen to the school district's pitch. You know, by working with us, I mean, we won't take it all on, but, you know, putting our name on it is a little bit more generic than the city.
Informational, particularly when
Yeah.
there's 3 government entities.
Yeah.
One of my takes from watching this, it's better. I wish, I guess I'm gonna ask that you go back and shoot Tremont one more time, because we hadn't opened the roundabouts and we hadn't painted them yet,
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
because it's even better.
Yeah.
Come join. Come join us in Port Orchard.
Conveniently located in the heart of Puget Sound on the Kitsap Peninsula between Seattle, Tacoma, and the Olympic National Park, where homes fill idyllic neighborhoods, where neighbors are friends. Port Orchard is surrounded by water and offers a change of pace from nearby urban cities, close enough but still far away. Ferries can shuttle you quickly and conveniently to Seattle or to Bremerton, and nearby highways take you to the Olympics or short trips to Tacoma. The South Kitsap School District's vision is to nurture growth, inspire achievement, and build community. Port Orchard is for families with neighborhood parks and a downtown where people of all ages meet. Port Orchard is clean. Port Orchard is growing and it's thriving. A community that cares about each other and beams with pride.
One of the things that really stands out about Port Orchard and Kitsap County as a whole is our support for the military. If you look at the top 2 employers in Kitsap County, it's the Naval Shipyard as well as the Navy. We're also driving distance to Joint Base Lewis McChord. So we have a strong military foundation here in Kitsap County, and that also carries over the kinds of families and kind of community feel that we have here.
Port Orchard is small town charm and friendly people and a fit for your lifestyle. So come join us in Port Orchard, a great place to live. There's something for everyone.
Next time we do this, we just had a TV, a big TV put in the back room.
Oh,
But we're not, we'll spend more time figuring out
How to use it.
today, because it just got set up for Friday.
I saw an error with that video. The traffic going by the Tacoma Dome was moving.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
It should be at a standstill.
So this is the first of the 3 videos, A Great Place to Live, and then there's 2 other ones. Join us in Port Orchard for economic development, and then join us in Port Orchard. So I'm going to go to the next one.
There's 3
Is that okay, or do you
we just
want
watched
some
one.
time
We
in
just
between?
watched one, right? There's 3 total.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Do we want to comment on this one, or do we want to go to the next 2 and then comment at the end?
Let's comment at the end.
Okay.
it's much improved. It is much improved, and I'm probably pretty good with that one. There's some tweaks I saw in the others. I still don't care for the mountain bike scene. We have to see a leisurely bike ride.
If you have a business, come join us in Port Orchard. Conveniently located in the heart of Puget Sound on the Kitsap Peninsula between Seattle, Tacoma, and the Olympic Peninsula, Port Orchard.
Well, one of the great things about Port Orchard is it's right here in the middle of everything. We're probably 15 minutes away from Tacoma, a ferry ride from Seattle. Port Orchard is wide open. There's a lot of business opportunities. Some of the most affordable retail space is available here in Port Orchard. It's the county seat. But right now, this is a great place to start a business.
West Side access with space to grow. And a city proactively developing business opportunity zone and friendly incentives. And a thriving business park, eager to help you grow. High-tech, software, and manufacturing are growing in Port Orchard. An educated workforce, along with a life and family balance, make Port Orchard a great place for your business. Services and tourism opportunities abound. And roads and infrastructure continue to enhance transportation and communications. Port Orchard business environment is growing. Service organizations that help to network and grow your relationships. So come join us in Port Orchard for a welcoming business environment. There's something for everyone.
My one critique on that one is if we could reshoot that one image of Tremont at rush hour with all the stripe, it's all done now, and that, it was much better than, last time it was still under construction, and that was good, but it looks, it's wow right now.
Yeah.
It's a wow right now.
From the point where it leads into it, there's that pole that's got the shrink wrap around it. Is that what you're talking about from that point forward?
Yeah, and the image of the traffic going through it.
Yeah, with no.
And with one leg of it still closed, it
Right.
doesn't have all the striping and the landscaping isn't finished, so that should be pretty minimal for him to come out and bring his drone out and.
I haven't heard one negative about the roundabout yet.
Well,
I said I haven't heard one negative.
So you don't have to share with us, Ron.
Yeah, that doesn't mean you have to share that.
I get, I'm in complaint department, so.
Okay, that's fine. I'm Mr. It's awesome.
It's awesome. Okay, go ahead, Ryan.
And he did mention that he is going to add some footage regarding the Rockwell Park. I did let him know it was completed, and he's going to add it. Whichever one we made the comment during the first round.
Okay,
I think it might be this video here. I can't.
okay. So- And this is the one too, it's got the mountain bike. I still don't care for the mountain bike.
Where is the mountain biking at?
I don't know.
But we don't know.
We don't know, and it's not, Shoot Trail in McCormick Woods where,
Nestled between Seattle and the Olympics, Port Orchard is located in the heart of Puget Sound. An ideal year-round destination. Where you can join us for paddling on our nationally recognized water trail. Join us for a round of golf at one of the local golf courses. Join us for a round of cold ones. Join us in one of our eclectic boutiques and collectible shops. Join us for one of our dining experiences. You might get here by boat or by car, but either way, you'll want to make time for a stroll or bike ride down the Bay Street pedestrian path, where you'll be treated to amazing views of the Olympics and Sinclair Inlet. Port Orchard is for families, and it's the perfect spot for a vacation. Quiet nature trails to hike, bike, and explore. Enjoy a boat ride while exploring Sinclair.
it just didn't
It's
appear.
different than we saw before. Yeah, because before it was at the front. Yeah.
Boaters and water sport enthusiasts enjoy easy water access, calm seas, and shoreside facilities in Port Orchard.
It's neat to see the community coming back out again and loving what we have, because downtown Port Orchard to me is like a hidden gem. Anybody that comes from out of town, the scenery is amazing. There's a lot of amazing businesses that are coming down here. There's activities to do. So it's neat to see how Port Orchard is coming alive again.
There's there's something for everyone.
So I think Tremont, once again, updated. And then if he gets out there in the next few weeks, right now Rockwell Park, all of those flowers that are phenomenal. I mean, last night I drove by there at 8 o'clock and there were people sitting everywhere in there. So if you got down there in an evening, on a nice day, in the next couple of weeks, there's some great imagery you could shoot of Rockwell, and then if we could get those two images of Tremont replaced at a, you know, in the afternoon when we've got a fair amount of traffic driving through it. I've been driving it at night, even at rush hour. I mean, there's a lot of movement going on in there, but there isn't a car stopping anywhere. It's great.
Seemed like it took some pressure, some pressure, not all of it, off Sedgwick too.
I've heard that from the businesses out there.
I was traveling the other day for that reason at rush hour.
It's gonna take time for people to retrain themselves not to drive through, sit in the back up downtown or sit in the back up at Sedgwick, because you can get through Tremont.
I was laughing because one of my neighbors said, yeah, it was great, it was open, and I took the detour anyway. I just started laughing.
And I've caught myself driving down Pottery and I stopped where there was a stop sign. It's not there anymore.
My only comment about the mountain bike one, I leave it in because most kids mountain bike.
Okay.
You know, that's.
It's better than it was.
Yeah, no, it's a nice short
It's
piece.
probably been, could very well be Banner Forest, which isn't Port Orchard, but it's.
I was thinking
Could
about.
be Jackson Park.
Or it could be Jackson along too.
Yeah, and also out of Cormac people.
Yep.
I enjoyed some of the drone footage that you, I thought that,
Did a nice job.
particularly where you
Much
see the marina and the town.
So would you agree then, update the Tremont images and get some footage here real soon of Rockwell Park, in there too?
Yeah, pretty awesome.
So I have a question on the one to attract businesses, the number 2 video, and this is just for thought. Because I'm not sure what kind of businesses it really is trying to attract. If it's trying to attract retailers in, or if you're trying to attract manufacturing in the business park.
Yes.
If it's more on the manufacturing side, I think a piece you might be missing is the workforce development. Sure, Olympic College isn't in Port Orchard, but their programs feed the shipyard, which is the biggest employer, and some of their trades might be beneficial to what they're looking for in the business park. So not only do employees or employers want to know, you know, if their site is suitable, but they also know where we're going to get our employees from. So just a thought of a tie. It may or may not work for this, but.
I think that is an element that we probably overlooked. And remembering that these are gonna go on our website,
Yes.
and we're gonna make them available to the Chamber's website.
And,
POPSA and the KITA.
Kita, and what is the,
Visit Kitsap.
Visit Kitsap, thank you. That's
Yeah.
one I was.
And I think Keita would appreciate that,
Yeah.
that in there as well.
Yeah. We're not putting them on television or anything like that, we're just, yeah.
And we've done this for under $10,000, all the videos.
And he did make a comment that we did change some voiceover from the last round to this round. And in the contract, it allows for one voiceover. So if we want any additional voice changes, it'll probably be an additional cost. But I just wanted to make that comment. And anybody have any comments regarding the voices this round?
I don't really want to spend any more money on voices on it.
Okay.
I'm probably comfortable with the voice content. There's just a couple of images
Okay.
that I'd like to change.
Yeah, he said images and filming, that's all pretty easy. Okay,
Well, and
Yeah, no,
Perfect.
it's a good one,
maybe as part of the toolkit, that can be better emphasized.
yeah.
Right. If, on the page that has the video, you can drop
Right.
down the bullet points a little more.
Okay.
Okay.
But I would like maybe the next iteration, do you want it to come back here, or are you ready for a council meeting?
I think we could show them at a council meeting, don't you?
Okay, so we'll get him to make those edits that we
Yep.
just discussed.
Yep.
And bring it to a council meeting.
Okay, on to, we didn't do our business community discussion. Do we have anything that, no, okay. Then we'll move on down to bring Brandy up, and the next ones are all hers.
RCW, once a year, we have to look at the Lodging Tax Committee appointments, how they're made up, and review it or make new appointments. So at this point, what I know of Cedar Cove Association Bed and Breakfast, they are no longer a bed and breakfast. The establishment was sold, and it's my understanding from having a conversation with the previous owner last week is that they are not operating it as a B&B.
Has it changed hands already?
Yes. So that one goes away. I've reached out to Comfort Inn, Days Inn, and I am on my list to reach out to Vista Motel. Typically, Vista Motel does not choose to participate.
Lorraine doesn't want to participate. She has some health issues.
Correct. So we'll be losing Mrs. Howell's Bed and Breakfast this round as well.
Is
She,
she going
she
to still be a bed and breakfast though?
Yes, she
Oh,
is.
okay.
She just took a spill, if you didn't know, and she ended up in a nursing facility for a while, and she's back on her feet. But she's still doing some rehab, and she just can't, got to focus on what she needs to do and
I know.
other things.
And Comfort Inn, which is the one downtown, I have reached out to him sometimes.
Jack, can you twist some arms, please? Because
So-
otherwise we're gonna have you and, and
One other
We could have,
person.
we could have one other hotelier on there.
we don't, by law, we don't
Airbnb,
have to.
Or B&B.
Yeah,
I'd like to.
we need, I'd like to have a committee of 4 and not a committee of 2.
I'll go talk to him personally.
Okay. That's the only way it's
That's,
gonna work.
yeah, because getting a hold of him is
Yeah,
futile.
it's pretty tough. And I know he's busy. And as far as staffing is holding the meetings, as long as the chair's okay, I think we're pretty reasonable into when we can hold those meetings during the day and the evenings.
I am now.
So,
Yeah. Oh, you're retired now, so we can do day meetings, can't we?
August 31st.
All right.
so if that's one of the issues of why there wasn't a commitment in the past, if we can get his schedule, that'd be great. We can work around it, I'm sure.
I can give you my schedule right now.
So once I hear from those two hoteliers, then I will get together with the mayor for him to appoint the other 2 participants, and then we'll bring it before council, and then we'll appoint. And then once we appoint, then we'll meet and start deliberations.
You can confirm on mine.
Perfect.
I didn't answer your email.
Okay, so that's what I have on the committee appointments.
So there's, could we, what I'm hearing is there's a potential that we may have a committee of 2.
Yes.
What's the RCW say it needs to be? Is there?
There is,
There isn't.
Oh.
as long
One
as it's
and one.
equal, as long as
Okay.
it's an equal partner.
I just don't want to have a committee of 2.
I
The
agree.
meetings will
I
go
agree.
really fast, but I don't believe it'll be as objective.
I believe more heads are better.
Yep.
Been staying out of the paper too.
And we have a first day for,
Not yet,
Okay.
that's next.
so that's, when I approached the Comfort Inn Chandler, I need to have something a little more like, hey, we're looking at these dates so I can pinpoint it down.
Hopefully we'll get that finalized in the next discussion.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay,
Go on down.
so the next one is the timeline for accepting applications for the lodging tax funds. So we're in a biennial budget. What was allocated for this year is $100,000 to be spent for to be spent in 2020. And just wanted to make sure that the committee didn't have any other changes to last year's process in opening up the application for the funds. It's been inconsistent, meaning sometimes the committee members wants to review those whole applications and revamp it and re-ask and present it out. I think the last 2 years we've kept the same application. So I'm just asking for direction. If we want to keep the same application, I can bring it back to the next meeting. You guys can pick it apart or just keep it the same. Is there anything?
Same application. It was doable. I think that was reasonable. I think it was good.
The one point that I say every year that I'm going to reiterate this year is I would like to see, and I think that we could figure out how to do it, is to set aside some monies for new events.
And that's on the Lodging Tax Committee's agenda to
It is.
discuss, and I do believe, I think it was the city of Bremerton that just did the same process. So my goal was to, when we meet for lodging taxes, to reach out to them to see what their process was, because I believe that was the previous committee's discussion is, hey, it makes sense, but what's the
How do you do
process?
it?
The committee
So-
actually had no say in that, and how Bremerton Council changed their
That's-
allocation.
Yeah, they,
Yeah.
So,
that's why I was joking about not making the paper.
The other thing that I'm just gonna say, I went down to, I walked the pedestrian path for the Mustang show. I parked down at West Bay, and when you walk, well, I guess it was the night before I went down to the night out. But the Comfort Inn was, that whole parking lot was Mustangs in the back.
Mhm.
Absolutely Mustangs, and I knew I'd see you here. Did you have a lot of?
I didn't have any Mustangs, but I get the, once that hotel fills, I get the people who are looking for somewhere else, so. But yeah,
But
you're
it
right,
was,
yeah.
right, but it was, that's what the lodging tax is to do, is to put heads
Right,
in
right.
beds, and there were a lot of
Looks
Mustangs.
like it's working.
Right.
So my proposed dates for accepting the application is, we'll open it up August 12th, which is next Monday, and we'll keep it open until September 9th, which is on a Monday. I know in the past, we've opened it up for a couple weeks. Some
It's almost
members of the
fun.
community wanted it open for a little bit longer, makes sense. They don't want to close on a Friday, they want the weekend to do it, makes sense, and I didn't want to have
That's
it
3 weeks.
Memorial Day week, or Labor Day weekend, so. So that's the time frame for there. And then the goal was to have the committee review the applications for the week of September 10th. So that would, and then depends on how long the committee needs to review the applications for, if we meet later that week or the following week.
We'll be able to meet the following
Yep.
week.
Yep. So,
We can meet that Monday, Tuesday.
so it looks like after September 20th, so the 21st and after, if he can tell me what his schedule is, because that's when the committee will meet, and then at that point, I'm assuming that the committee will still want to hear from the applicants, they'll present their, so after September 20th, we'll pick a couple dates and go from there, so hopefully we can hear from the other hotelier. But ideally, we'll need to know by the end of August, so the mayor can bring it to the council to appoint the committee members before we meet. So that's the time frame there.
Yeah, and I need to know in the next couple of weeks, because I want to get it at least on the August 20th council meeting.
So basically, what I'm hearing is basically first meeting on the 9th or the 10th. Presentations the week of the 23rd, September 23rd.
September 10th of that week is the week that you guys are going to review the applications?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Review the applications and the presentations the week of the 23rd.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Does that work for you as well? Okay. So, so I'll move forward with that timeline, and we'll make sure we get the committees appointed to the council before we start that process. But I didn't want to hold the applications
No, no.
up for that. I
No,
just didn't think it
that's what I'm saying,
made
yeah.
sense to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure you guys agreed. And that's pretty much it on that.
Okay, then we'll move down to our last discussion
Could I
item.
back up for a minute?
Sure.
On lodging tax, I
Sure.
think also, just to put it on the table, is one thing we do want to see is how does the lodging tax money come in?
Yeah.
And where, I'm going to use this word, please don't, anybody throw anything at me, where reserves look, because that was one of the items that we wanted to talk about and follow up with the council and with the committee. I forgot. Sorry.
Yep, I'll have that on the lodging tax
No, I know, I
committee.
just was
And
saying-
then I'll reach out to the finance director to see what numbers we can have
That
to
might
provide for
work on the
lodging
city
tax.
council card,
Yep.
counterparts here.
Before she jumps into that one, I've got one item I'd just like to, the Small Business Development Center opened, had a grand opening last week. It's located in the North Kitsap Library. It's funded, it's a partnership with Western Washington University. And I have some of their materials. I will propose I'm gonna hand this to Beck, and she's gonna drop it in one of your two mailboxes when she's done with it, and then the other one's responding, and then eventually it gets back to me because I only have one. But it's an economic profile for Kitsap County that they prepared. I think this is something that, particular when we get a new library down here, this is something we should be funding. These are, you know, resources and tools that help small businesses succeed. And I'm not saying we shouldn't fund maybe other activities, but we maybe need to look closely at some of the things we're doing, because I think we need to find a few $1,000s in a future budget for an organization like this.
And then as a reminder, at some point, if we can get that back, so we can scan it and give it to Carrie for the.
And so I would propose that we get, when they get settled, maybe in September, to have them, would you want them to come to this committee or to a full council meeting? Which would be repetitive to have them here, and then if you wanted them a
Right, and
council
I'm
meeting.
fine with either.
Full council.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't want to withhold anything from anyone else.
And I'll go up and snag as many of those as I can.
I got one given to me when I from, so.
Perfect. And we'll go on to temporary vendor food trucks.
Yes, so we received one application, and I'm sure that we'll be receiving more once we vet this process here. So we don't have anything in our, well, I take that back. So we have a temporary vendor license application that allows vendors to vend on public property, public right-of-way. This particular application wants to set up at the McCormick Woods Park, which means that they will be stationary. And when they're stationary, since that particular location has not been pre-approved by the council, I wanted to see if this committee, what their thoughts was from an economic development standpoint. Is this something that we want to pursue at not only the McCormick Woods Park, but possibly other parks? How do we want to address this particular
Parking is a challenge
That's where I was going
That's
right
what I
with
was-
that.
yeah, where were they gonna put it?
in a parking spot.
Yeah, no,
Or
can't.
county.
As large as that is. Yeah, that's my big concern is that.
Which one is it?
This is Cool Vibes Ice Cream. And then we do have one that just applied for their business license, and it is JP Peanut Butter and Jelly Mobile Vendor, something like that. So, but they haven't picked a location that they're gonna vend.
I love these things, and I want to see them succeed here, downtown, at our parks, wherever, but I don't know, anytime I drive out there,
They're
what
park
land use is going to be taking up at their next meeting is, we're going to probably put restrictions on the speed limit out there and the parking that's happening out on the road that isn't safe. And if we're going to take a couple of parking spots away, we only have 30 parking stalls out there. And, you know,
If it's in park, we will have to change the code in Title 20, because we did allow food trucks in a number of zones in the recent code update, but in Parks and Recreation, that was not one of them.
Oh, well, maybe that's
So
the
is
answer.
the parking lot considered the park, or, I mean, for purposes of?
part of the park.
Okay.
It's inside the park. And when McCormick North moves forward, Campus Parkway gets built, there's a third phase to the park, and there's a whole bunch of street parking that comes in off of another trail that isn't built yet. So there's a solution, but it's 3 to 5 years away to resolve the parking. I hope sooner, but.
So did I hear that correct, Carrie, that, so this is not allowed at the park, at any parks, temporary vending?
It's not an allowed use in the Parks and Recreation zone.
But there's nothing to prevent somebody from parking in front of Clayton Park on the sidewalk. They just can't vend inside the park. In this situation, we don't have
Do we
street
allow,
parking.
do we allow vending from streets?
Yes. There's a whole section of the code, it's temporary vendor permit, yes.
Remember the person we talked about up at the courthouse?
Yeah. He was down here first, and then he was up at the courthouse. I don't know where he's at now.
I haven't seen him, that's why I was wondering.
It was good, too.
At
It was
the
good
Thai
Thai-
food.
the Thai food.
And there is
Ice
a,
cream trucks that just travel around the streets and.
Yeah, but they're not in the park. they're not,
No, I know, but what are they covered under?
Which one?
Like an ice
The
cream truck?
mobile ice cream truck.
So if they're mobile, moving throughout the street, then they're called a hawker because they're driving. Yeah.
Step right up, boys and
sure ice cream.
Yeah. But if they're stationary, then they're a temporary vendor.
Get a hawker permit, huh?
Yeah.
And it's not that we couldn't change the code, so we
Yeah.
just need to know and go through that process, and if that's
I
what
think
council wants
I'd
to
be
change it.
problematic right now to change the code, because that's the only park where they would be in the park. The rest of them are parks in residential settings that they could park on the street and be served under our existing code.
And we don't want that right at that park.
And
right now.
probably also not takeaway parking.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a huge
Correct.
factor.
Easy enough.
But I do like your card. Kind of cool.
Yeah, that would just be, I'm assuming they would just want to do it for a couple of months. They're not gonna.
Summer months.
Okay, and only on sunny days.
Yeah, only on sunny days.
Got them this week.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anything else? Okay,
All right.
are we gonna be good for the second Monday in September? Does anybody know any schedule problems?
No, I don't need.
I'm just challenged. I'll get here as soon as I can.
Right, I know you